Thank you, Jim. I was introduced one time for a gem and mineral show in Asheville, and I was introduced multiple times as a genealogist. And then they messed it up and called me a gynecologist. So, Jim, you're okay, but it's thanks for having me. It's good to see this crowd. I apologize if you were on June 10th at the Senior Center. Deb and I were in the Asheville Hospital. She was having outpatient surgery. It was supposed to last an hour. It lasted 4 hours. So I looked, and I was supposed to be here at 7, and it was 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. We didn't get home till 10. So I apologize for that, but Dr. Dan Barron was good enough to step in, and he'd not seen one of these slides. How many of you went to that? Well, glad you came back, and I apologize for that, but some of these slides we will explain in detail, but this was an impactful storm. Probably one of the most catastrophic events, of course, we've had here, but we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about a lot of pictures. We're going to talk about what caused the storm, where the energy came from, and some of those, the criteria of that storm. But there it was once it was classified as a Category 4, came right over Panama City, Florida, and little did we know what was going to happen to us here. It had never happened here before. We've never had a storm this impactful ever. We've had some that were close, but not quite this big. And if you have a question as we're going, just raise your hand. I like to answer those questions as we go and as we proceed. But Hurricane Helene, a large catastrophic tropical cyclone, notable for its rapid intensification that ultimately produced a wide swath of damage and loss of life that extended from northwestern Florida, where the storm made landfall on September 26, 2024, to Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. And it did also impact parts of Virginia. I don't know where this, Margaret Young sent me this picture, but that's supposed to be an image of Helene coming to the mountains. And it's a monster. Has anybody seen that image before? Do you know where it came from? But it's supposed to be an image of Helene. And I just loaded that, but you can see the monster headed to the mountains, and little did we know how bad that would be. And I'd always heard about the impact of hurricanes there was a quadrant that was really, really bad, but it's that northeast quadrant where the plus sign is, which is so bad, because this is a good slide that shows the impact of a moving storm. This storm is moving at 20 miles an hour. So if it's a 100 mile an hour, let me put this down a minute. If it's a 100 mile an hour storm and it's moving 20 miles an hour, that's 120 mile an hour impact here to that northwest quadrant. Over here, it's lessened if you have a 100 mile an hour storm moving 20 miles an hour this way. You subtract the 20, so 80 mile an hour winds over here. But this is part of what caused the trees to lie down this way in our area, and then after the storm passed, they went across each other. So in many places you'll see the trees crossed over each other, and that's the reason why, because of that right there. Helene's high winds and flooding killed more than 230 people, making it the deadliest hurricane to strike the U.S. since Hurricane Maria ravaged Puerto Rico in 2017. Some estimates put the economic impact of the storm, including property and infrastructure damage, as high as $200 billion, which would make Helene the costliest storm in U.S. history. And we see the cost of that as cleanup still is happening in your backyard. But that front right maximum hurricane impact, you can see where that was. And when we look at some of the impact maps that are going to follow, you're going to see that the little town of Spruce Pine was right in the middle of that, took the heaviest brunt. The most damaged counties were Yancey and Mitchell. Yancey and Mitchell. So the impact of the winds and the rain came right over us, and we're going to track some of that and show you what hit us. Helene's metamorphosis from an area of scattered thunderstorms and rain to a Category 4 hurricane in the span of a little more than 2 days was fueled by abnormally warm waters in the Caribbean Sea and Gulf of Mexico, which meteorologists have attributed to global warming. The power of those winds, the carry load of of the rain, and the total impact was due to heat, the heat in the ocean. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but it's a warming ocean that caused that and caused that energy. And we're going to talk about how much water was carried here. It was a heck of a lot of water. We measured it. So you'll see that slide in a minute. But again, there's the track of the storm. These are warming oceans, and we'll see a heat impact map in a minute of how these areas of the oceans are warming. But it came up through here. Here's the time, 8 p.m. Friday. It was right here. And of course, when you see this track, that northeast quadrant went right slap over this area right here. So that's why it impacted us. We thought if it had come more straight over us, impact wouldn't have been as bad. But it turned enough to put its maximum power right on top of this area, right on top of us. Yes, ma'am.
Everyone is saying it's so unusual, such an anomaly for a hurricane to hit this far in. But it looks as though that's a track any hurricane could take. So why is this one so different?
Because of the wind power and the heat that it was carrying. And I'll show that some more, and we'll show some of those damages. But we've had, when Fran and Ivan came, did many of you experience that? Our pond flooded and flowed over. This is the only time it's done that again. But those hurricanes were back to back. But never did we have such a saturating rain and that amount of rainfall, which caused a lot of the damage. Helene continued to gather strength from the unusually warm surface waters of the Gulf of Mexico, which stood in excess of 84 degrees F, nearly 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the 2003-14 mean average. As it approached the Florida Panhandle, Helene was reclassified as a Category 2 hurricane at 8 a.m. EDT on September 26. Helene grew into a Category 3 hurricane by 2:25 p.m. and then a Category 4 by 6:20. See how fast it grew, just incredibly fast. With its central pressure falling from 960 millibars to 947. That's a big drop. And its maximum sustained winds increasing from 100 miles an hour to 130 miles an hour in fewer than 10 hours. So the power of that was unbelievable. Ocean temperatures. This is an ocean temperature map. And of course, we are sitting about right here. But the hurricane generated right down here in that little Luke yellow reddish warm. These are temperatures. These are temperature increases. The yellow is up to about plus 5 degrees. The end of the red color. Look at these colors here. Those are ocean water temperature increases, means, as of March 25th, 2025. So this was an incredibly warm area right here. So the heat in that ocean is what that hurricane picked up. And that energy of that heat started the swirling and started the power. And the power would be released on us. That energy would be released on us. Helene moved inland during the early morning hours of September 27th. And by 5 a.m., with the storm center located over central Georgia, NOAA officials downgraded it to a tropical storm. However, some 3 hours later, Helene turned northwest. That's when it turned away from northwest this way, which put the blunt over us. Across western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee, although Helene's winds had diminished to tropical storm strength, The storm delivered a broad and deadly swath of heavy rain across the southeastern U.S. And a lot of that wind spun tornadoes. You can look at areas toward Poplar, some areas off the Parkway. You look at a tornado swirl had to do that. Some people aren't classifying those tornadoes, but all you have to do is look at it and see what happened to those trees. In parts of Florida, Georgia, North and South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia, record rainfall caused rivers to overflow and produce flash floods, road washouts, and even landslides in some areas. And we're going to focus on that and what those landslides do, how landslides work, what they do, and their devastation and their power. 6 months after it hit the U.S., the National Hurricane Center released its final report on Hurricane Helene. We know and remember very well here in North Carolina how bad it was, but below are some horrible reminders. We all know this. Death and damage. The number of fatalities linked directly to Hurricane Helene had surpassed 230 people by October 7th, with most attributed to flooding. Helene's victims spanned 6 states: Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and Tennessee. And about half the deaths all occurred in North Carolina.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I have heard that if they haven't found somebody that obviously drowned because somebody saw them go, but they're not counting them.
Right.
Is that true?
There's a law that the person has to be dead. Correct me if I'm wrong, David. 7 years. They have to be missing 7 years. But one of the ladies that was supposedly drowned, by the way, that lady, our grandkids saw floating down the river, holding on a log, screaming. They saw her in Poplar. They were at Huntdale.
Wow.
What's the law's name, David?
That's what I was going to do. It's Elena's Law.
Elena's Law.
Is her name. And Dudley, our local representative, has introduced a bill in the legislature to change that from 7 to 1 year.
Yes, and so we hope that. And let me introduce David and his son. This is David Biddix. David is the spokesman for Mitchell County, North Carolina. So when you heard updates during the storm and updates today, David's the one that does that. And he was great enough to be there at the first showing of this, and he agreed to come back because many of you have asked if it's going to be recorded. David, how can they get access to that recording?
It'll be on YouTube on the Mitchell County Historical Society site.
Okay, everybody hear that?
Maybe this weekend sometime, but it'll depend on the edit.
Okay, thank you. Helene was the deadliest hurricane for the United States since Katrina in 2005, with at least 248 fatalities, including at least 175 direct deaths. 85 direct deaths occurred in North Carolina, with 8 due to wind, and 77 from freshwater flooding. 20 to 30 inches of rain fell in the mountains of North Carolina. Most of it here. As of April 7th, 2025, there were 3 people missing from Yancey County, 1 from Mitchell County, and 1 from Avery. Is that still?
The Avery one has been found.
Okay.
Mitchell and Yancey are still.
And I think the Avery one was a husband of a lady that came from the campground, from Buck Creek.
Him not very long.
And he was in a mud pile, not far from where he had drowned, right in Avery County next to Buck Creek. By the way, we go to church with a family that owns Buck Creek Campground, and their campground was devastated, wiped out, but they're rebuilding it back. Many mountain peaks in western North Carolina suffered extensive tree falls and damage due to these wind gusts. The highest wind gust was near 106 miles per hour at Mount Mitchell. It produced an estimated $78.7 billion in damage to the U.S. One of the photos below is flooding just outside of Boone, North Carolina on September 27th. So the tree damage was devastating, and you go anywhere and see it. A lot of it, if some of you have just gotten here for the summer, a lot of it's covered up from the leaf foliage. But when the leaves were gone, it looked like toothpicks laying in a lot of places, just devastating timber loss. This is a picture in Boone. This is right when it was happening, and these waters came up I've heard people tell that they were at the water's edge and it came up within minutes, within a few minutes. So the water rose that fast and these poor people were caught. By the way, if you've been listening to the news, this just happened again yesterday on I-40 on the Tennessee border. Another wipeout. I-40 is now closed. It's closed again. Hurricane Helene official report. Total fatalities 248. Housing units damaged or destroyed 125,000. Total damage costs $79 billion. Landslides 2,000 plus. Landslide counties up to 225. The North Carolina Geological Survey counts those, and they use aerial footage and aerial photographs and LiDAR images to see those landslides. So that's how they notice them. They see them from aerial. Acres of forest damage, 822,000 acres of forest damage. Peak gusts, Mount Mitchell, 106 miles per hour. Wasn't far off that at Roan Mountain. 101 at Roan Mountain. So we're right between those two areas. Most rain is Busick, 30.78. I've heard reports from people that lived at Busick. It was in excess of 40 inches. If you don't know where Busick is, if you get on the Parkway and go toward Asheville, right before you get to right after you pass Wild Acres Tunnel, that's where 80 crosses. Turn right on 80, go into Yancey County, and that's Busick. The little store that's a produce stand and used to be I think it still is a gas station. That's downtown Busick. So Busick, by the way, a crow flies is 5 miles from here. Maybe 5 miles, not far, so very, very close to us. Stream and river gauges exceeding record levels. That's the most they've ever been. 63 gauges. Those are in the rivers surrounding us. Flash flood emergencies, 34. People rescued by the Coast Guard, 865. So that goes on way below us. But, not only did it ravage us, but it ravaged other places too greatly. Again, there's the hurricane path. And again, its birth right here in the Caribbean. And then its main impact was this swath right here. Yes?
Well, you got that map up. You mentioned the heat, the ocean, the water. My experience with hurricanes, everything in Florida, what I've heard all my life is that the mountains tend to shear the wind, and that usually breaks the storm down. My question is, this went from a 4 when it made landfall. Come across Georgia, it turned into a 1, and then a tropical storm. What made it intensify?
I'm going to show you, and we're going to talk about that. In this case, the mountains made it intensify. So we're going to talk about that. The mountains were part of the problem. This is the hurricane. This is the rating of hurricanes. That's a major hurricane, the purple. Major hurricane here when it hit. But look at this. It was a hurricane after it formed in Caribbean. It formed a hurricane here. Major hurricane. Then it went back to hurricane speed here, just like it was over the ocean. And then it, right about Macon, Georgia, it turned to a tropical storm as it came over us. But these were based on wind speeds. That's the hurricane category as it approached us. And so you can see how it even intensified a little bit more as it was coming. Several factors to keep in mind that were taken into consideration with the analysis. These wind gusts were persistent for multiple hours. This isn't just a gust. The winds that hit us were sustained. So they didn't let up. And how many of you were here when it happened? You felt that. We thought our house was going to blow away. It was sustained. With the analysis is these wind gusts were persistent for multiple hours compared to a thunderstorm where the most intense winds last for only a few minutes. A longer duration of high-end wind gusts combined with very saturated soils and full foliage on trees resulted in an incredible amount of trees down. In many cases, trees were rocked back and forth. And every time they rock and they get a big rock and it's raining 2 inches an hour, that rain's just soaking in. And eventually it gets so wet And so, and there's nothing to hold the tree, so the whole root ball comes up. You saw a few trees that broke in half, but most of them had root balls with them. The whole root ball came up. In many cases, trees were rocked back and forth by frequent gusts until the soaked soils could no longer support them, leading to the eventual falling of the tree. The winds also changed direction, as we talked about earlier, as the center of circulation passed by to the west. This resulted in trees falling across each other and not necessarily all in one direction. So it's getting pummeled this way, so it's weakened, then it gets pummeled this way, and it can't stand it anymore. And remember, we had 3 days of rain. Before the big rains and actual hurricane got here, I think we'd had 4 to 6 inches already. So the ground was saturated, fully saturated. Extensive damage to trees and power infrastructure occurred across much of the area, with structural damage not from fallen trees noted in some of the hardest hit locations. Each color shading, this will be the next map, on the map below represent the frequent gusts along with the estimated peak winds within concentrated pockets of greater damage. Across the mountains, there was a very sharp increase in winds on the northeast side of Asheville. Where's the northeast side of Asheville? Sound familiar? We're in the middle of the northeast side of Asheville, especially with the higher elevation with southeast facing slopes. Who had high elevations with southeast facing slopes?
Yeah.
Northeast of Asheville to Avery County sustained the most extreme damage. The highest measured wind gust was 106 miles per hour on Mount Mitchell. A second pocket of extreme wind also occurred in the vicinity of Roan Mountain, mainly above 6,000 feet. So if you were above 6,000 feet, you were going to be blown away. Literally blown away. And this map, this is a good map that shows those wind concentrations. These are those over 100 mile an hour winds. Look what's right in the middle of this. Here's Mitchell County. Here's Yancey County. Here's Avery County. And even the upstate in parts of North Georgia, including Augusta, had a lot of wind damage. But then you had wind damage across these foothill mountains here. But we're going to concentrate in here in just a minute. These purple areas were the highest wind ranges. And if you look, these are the blacks. This is the Black Mountain Range. And if you look at a topographic map of the Blacks and Black Mountain, a lot of people call it the hook. Anybody ever heard it called that? There's your hook. There's your hook right there. That's the shape of the mountains. That's the way the Blacks turn. It makes a hook shape. But when you look at this area, 2 areas of intense 80 to 90 mile an hour gusts with pockets of up to 100 miles an hour occurred across the highest mountain elevations. The first area was along the Blue Ridge Parkway and Black Mountains, with the second area around Roan Mountain. So here's the parkway. Here's Mount Mitchell. These are the Blacks. A broad area, large red shaded area, extensive wind damage occurred from northeast Buncombe County through Avery County, all the way up through here. The worst damage was noted on southeast facing slopes, especially at higher elevations. So these are the mountain ridges here. There's the Roan. These are the Blacks. So if you were on the southeast side of these and high up and in those areas, you bore the blunt of it. A lot of structures and houses in those areas were wiped out. Some of them by wind, some by trees hitting those houses. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But this is a really good map showing the extent and the concentration of those wind zones. These are landslides. These are the landslides that the North Carolina Geological Survey mapped. And if you look, Asheville's here, Spruce Pine's under all of that. Newland's about right here. So if you look at the landslide map, and it's the track of the hurricane. If you notice those tracks, hurricane came right up through here. But that northwest quadrant was the devastating area here. Not really from the winds, but from the rain. A landslide, these landslides were generated because they liquefied. these areas were so saturated with water, the soils just turned to mush. And then gravity takes hold of that mush, and then you can't stop them. Many of the people were killed by landslides. And once a landslide starts, you can't stop it. They don't stop for anything. Some of the landslides, it's reported, and we'll show some pictures, as they were going downhill and then the basin turned, that landslide debris banked off of the hills and went up 40 feet into trees. So the power of the landslides coming down banked like a race car, and the momentum of the debris went as the part of that slide hit the trees. And the slides were going anywhere, a landslide will go anywhere from 20 to 45 miles an hour. 45 miles an hour, you can't outrun one. And once they stop, the power of those is unstoppable. But each little dot here is a noted, recorded landslide. Yes?
Of a landslide, is there a certain amount of acreage where you consider a landslide?
No. You can have a 6 square foot area. Look at 226A. Look at all those little landslides and big ones. We're going to show some big ones. And one of them, my last slide shows one that reoccurred 2 weeks ago. You had debris in the road. And once these areas are impacted, it impacts areas to the sides of those landslides. There's nothing to hold them on the side. Yes, ma'am.
How long do you anticipate before the mountains have essentially drained, that we can go back to a more solid, where we don't have? I mean, if we get 5 inches of rain, we've got more landslides again.
Absolutely. And this week in the mountains, have y'all been, and we'll show a picture of it later, but have you seen the slide on the side of CeeLo? It's huge. That whole part of that area of the mountain came off. That's going, and when these slides come off, your chances of having that grow back, biological succession is what it's called. We have any biologists in the room? No? Well, you had biology and you probably heard about succession. That's when the growth and plants and material starts taking back over an area that's been devastated. But when it's bare rock and it's tilted like this, it's hard to get something to grow on that. And I'm going to show you right now while I'm thinking about it. Our mountains, and you've seen some of our talks before, our mountains are folded mountains, so they form like this. So our mountains are all like this. Southeast slopes are mainly right here. So as the mountains push up and buckle up, that rock strata, which is foliated, is like almost like a slide. So these things are in peril already. When you saturate and liquefy those soils, they just go. And the worst thing is it's the southeast sides that get it the worst, because the geology foliation is like that. On most of the other side of the blacks, it's like this. So there's nothing there to really slide on. I don't know of any slides that happen on the west side of the blacks. They all happen on the east side, just like this. And we'll show more of that.
You think like maybe 2 years, 5 years?
Some of those will never recover. Never. You will see evidence of this storm as long as you live, maybe for 100 years. There will be geological evidence of this storm probably for the unseen future. Especially on some of the slides, it will take a long time to recover. This is a map of the power outages. Look at the track. Look at the track here. The dark red, 100%. Light red, 60%, all the way to 10%. But if you look at the dark red area, there's spruce pine, there's Mitchell, Yancey, and Avery County right there. Right there. And we know what happened to our power. A lot of us didn't get it back for months. But look at here where the storm was rather strong. But again, you just follow that track of the storm. But that's power outages. Georgia had 949,000. North Carolina had 1 million, over 1 million outages. Total customers without power, 4.7 million people without power. So it was devastating on power, but the strongest hit area was right where we are. This is a National Weather Service rainfall. This is a rainfall map, and then you can see precipitation. 30 inches to 50 inches is the light pink here, and there's actually light pink. Busick, let's see where we are. There's Mitchell County. Busick's right about here, right under that ford, and there's a little pink right up under there, but most of the purple, really dark, was right through here. So we were the most devastated. McDowell County got it pretty bad, but when you look at the rainfall amounts, just devastating rainfall amounts. And remember these amounts, because when we calculate the amount of rain that fell, that was involved using these numbers. I mean, every bad slide you see here, we're in the middle of it, which is how devastating it was. This is, again, wind speeds again, or rainfall, maximum amount, Busick, North Carolina, these little areas right here. And so we're right there. We're right there. So this was the center trough of the most rainfall that dumped.
Little Switzerland doesn't have an official rain calculator anywhere, right?
I don't think so. Did anybody have a rain gauge going?
We had a gauge go.
It didn't blow it over?
Just on Breath Creek.
Okay. But Busick and Spruce Pine and some of those other areas, Mount Mitchell, were devastated. Here are the rain amounts. There's officially recorded, again, I've heard people say they've had up to 40. But you can see Spruce Pine had an average of 24 inches. And let's see what else. Table Rock had 16 inches. Grandfather Mountain had 15 inches. Banner Elk, 14 inches. So you can see the highest areas of rainfall were in this category here, right near us. So just unheard of amounts of rainfall. And then strategic wildfire risk after the storm. So these are the trees that are down, and this is the most damage, the extreme damage, right where we are, right through here. So a lot of that timber is still down, and of course that's what's being gathered up, and the cost of that is phenomenal.
Alex, half of the timber in Mitchell County is on the ground.
Good point. And you believe that when you look at it. Look at these hauling away trucks. They're everywhere, and they're all full, and they never stop. But that's hauling all of that way. But good point, David. Half the timber is down.
And that's counting, up on the road places where they'll never be able to get.
And you feel for people. I have friends that own, Alan Phillips is Bud Phillips' son, Mitchell Lumber, Mitchell Timber Company. Well, look what they lost. And they own most of the land. Most of the private land is owned by them. And they just were devastated, their business. They own also Bryant & Young Lumber Company in Burnsville. Yes?
Where's the funding for all these trucks that are hauling all the lumber debris?
David, that's FEMA, and the county's getting reimbursed for that.
Yes, but that is federal tax money.
So that's good. Here's the calculation. Most rain fell along the Continental Divide of the Blue Ridge Parkway. All of you know that. Continental Divide, Blue Ridge Parkway. I used a width of 2 miles of influence on the east and the west side of the Continental Divide, which is the Blue Ridge Parkway here. So 2 miles. Southeast of the Parkway in a length of 20 miles. That's from Wilson Creek near Grandfather Mountain. That was the extent of the rainfall. To Mount Mitchell, and an average rain amount, in the middle of that 20-mile section of 24 inches. If you take 20 miles by 2 miles by 24 inches, using those dimensions, that's how much rain fell. That's not gallons, that's millions of tons of water. And it's hard to imagine how much water that is until you compare it with something. That is the same weight of a solid concrete block of 1,000 feet long, 1,000 feet wide, and 1,000 feet high. Concrete block. Or a railroad car will hold 100 tons of material. That was 700,000, that would be 700,000 100-ton railroad hopper cars, which is equivalent to a train 7,700 miles long, which would reach from Spruce Pine to London, England. That's how much water fell on us. And that's just one side of the parkway. The other side got the same amount. That train goes to England and back. I mean, it's hard to understand how much water fell. And when you think about the Tow River, getting the blunt of that, Linville River, Catawba River, Wilson Creek, Nolichucky, Cane Creek, Cane River, all that water is going either into Lake James or it's going into Lake Douglas in Tennessee. And devastating that route. And we're going to show pictures of that route. There's drone images of I-40 landslide near Old Fort, and there were some other things in Old Fort that killed people. The Frenchball River reached over 16 feet by 11 a.m. on September 27th, flooding most of the River Arts District. Seen here from the Haywood River Bridge. So, and most of you have been to Asheville and seen the devastation there. And all of our friends said, I'm glad you're okay, but Asheville got tore up from watching the news. They forgot about us, and we got it worse. A local resident moves boulders amidst fast-flowing water after he's swept away and stretched a flooded road tropical storm near Boone. So that's how the roads looked in Boone during the storm. As Helene's massive circulation combined with the moisture, it resulted in even more rain before transitioning into a post-tropical cyclone. Additionally, recent studies indicate that some hurricanes are absorbing more moisture from the warming Gulf of Mexico, which further increases rainfall losses. So they're not only absorbing more water, but when they get to the mountain and then the clouds and everything start trying to go over the mountain, the pressure releases, falls, and they drop their load. So that's what's going on here too. So not only do you get these huge amounts of rainfall and cloud cover carry, dropping their load, but you've got the high peaks, got southeast slopes, and you've got all of that wind speed combined. Hurricane Helene forecast for western North Carolina. Catastrophic, life-threatening flooding possible. Did we really pay attention to that? We knew we were going to get a lot of rain, but nobody knew, especially those people that couldn't get out of their houses and wash down the river with their house. And they didn't have time to get out. And if you were like Deb and I, we were in the house is shaking, the wind's blowing sideways. If we had to get out of the house, I don't know if I could have gotten out the door. It was so bad. Chris, was it that bad at your place? By the way, Chris and his wife were rescued by the National Guard. Areas of western North Carolina, including Asheville, have already received more than a half foot of rain, and effects of Hurricane Helene haven't even begun yet. National Weather Service told the Citizen Times that the outer rain bands of Helene will likely arrive in western North Carolina this evening, September 26, bringing even more heavy rain. 6 to 10 inches of additional rain is likely across western North Carolina with the addition of high winds. Nobody knew how high those winds would be. These are the slides along the parkway. This comes from the parkway. These are major slides along the parkway. They are all on this side. This is the parkway running through here. Spruce Pine's about right here. This is the Wild Acres slide. If you get on the parkway at 80, on Highway 80, and go toward the Wild Acres tunnel, right before you get to the tunnel, it's wiped out. We'll show you pictures of that. They've not even started working on that yet. But these are all major slides up and down the parkway. And so these are areas of closure. This area, let's see, actually between Linville Falls and Mount Mitchell may be, according to the Parkway, 1 to 2 years before opening. This is the reason it was so bad on southeast slopes. Again, there's your tilted strata. This is on Highway 107 going to Mount Mitchell. This is on the road to Mount Mitchell State Park. But all the strata is like that. It dips like this at about 50 degrees. So it's hard for foliage to grow on that in the first place. So when you get loose soils, thin soils, and it gets saturated, there's nothing holding it. So that's why those areas were so bad. Again, that's that foliated rock. And most rock in our area is ash metamorphic sweep, which is a metamorphic rock, which is a past siltstone that's not really competent. These are all of your landslides on the Parkway. And they're basically from Waynesville to Boone. As spring arrives, so do impressive repair efforts at many locations. The Parkway section nearest Banner Elk, Grandfather Mountain, to Blowing Rock is open. However, there are both pre-planned and storm repairs underway on the North Carolina side, plus tree cleanup in southern Virginia from the big ice storm in February. Remember that too. In addition to widespread damage to National Park Service facilities, the Linville Visitor Center, Linville Falls, was wiped out. Nearly 200 miles in North Carolina, while 2/3 of the Parkway should be open by summer, more by fall. Many sections will take years to rebuild due to the massive tree fall and erosion that damaged buildings, trails, and more. It's really the landslides that are so bad. The highest concentration of overall damage occurred from the Linville Falls area near milepost 317, south to Mount Mitchell State Park near milepost 349, along with destruction of park facilities near Linville Falls, including the Visitor Center, picnic area, comfort station, and portions of the campground. Park teams have documented over 4 dozen landslides. 4 dozen! And other storm-related natural and cultural resource damage in those 38 miles of Parkway alone. While the road is open in all 217 miles of the Parkway in Virginia, additional repair and cleanup work remains. In the coming months, recovery work in Virginia will focus on roadway and drainage repairs, hazard tree work, woody debris removal, culvert cleaning, removing siltation from mill ponds, and repairing damage. So that's going on here too, all here. I took this picture. This was at the Parkway in about 1990. You can tell by the age of that Crown Vic there. But Dave, you might remember this one. This one closed the Parkway for a year. And this was in a rainfall event, but these huge boulders came. This is right before you get to Crabtree Falls picnic area. So if you're coming from Little Switzerland, you can actually see this rock wall. If you look at the pavement, there's new pavement from here to here because this took 3 feet of the road out. But this again is that sloping strata, which is hard to stay by itself anyway. So much less when it gets soil on top. The soil doesn't want to stay on it either. But this slide rode trees down with it. But this was a slide, and I was involved helping the Parkway to get this one removed, and they always ask, we going to have some more of those?
No.
You will always have them. They will never not happen on the Parkway because of the geologic structure of the Parkway there on this east side of the Continental Divide. There's the Parkway. That's the slide. This back here, back this way, is Wild Acres Road, where it crosses and goes to Girls Camp Road, is right back here, about 200 yards. Wild Acres Tunnel is behind me, about 200 yards, but the road's gone. There's nothing to hook the road to, and they've not even started on this yet. They haven't touched this yet. There were some slides from this side above this area of the Parkway. They've cleaned those, but they haven't touched this.
That slide goes about 300 yards.
It does.
It goes
There's where it is. That's where it goes down. But these things start, once they liquefy and they start going, they're unstoppable. So this thing goes as far as it has gravity to pull it. And as you can see, the ground is just liquefied. It's just turned to putty.
Is that why it's still blocked off right there?
Oh, yes.
It's that one?
Yes. And more past that, toward Mount Mitchell. I heard Mount Mitchell State Park probably won't open for years either. They've even sent their staff home. Their staff's not even there at the park. You can get to the park from Asheville, but you can't get to it this way because there are multiple of these. Here's another one. Now, I borrowed that picture, but I don't, David, do you know where that one is?
That is, that's on the other side. There's two slides involving
Okay, that may be on
at the time.
Okay.
And that's one of them.
And look at that. I mean, how do you fix that? But that's why you can not anticipate using the parkway for a while. And you feel sorry, or you feel for places like the Inn that had just purchased that. That's their livelihood. That access is their livelihood. This is Osborne Knob, and some of you know of that one. I was called to that one, and y'all know. Some of you probably know whose house that is. But it slid right in front of. The slide started here, but the problem is there are cracks back here behind the house in the ground. Those cracks opened up because of this. So they're trying to stabilize their house. But can you imagine? They didn't lose their house, but it's teetering.
That slide went all the way to 226.
I'm going to show you that one too. Look, that's from the porch of the house looking down, and it goes to 226. Just devastating. And if you notice, it's down to bare rock, and it took everything. Everything. They don't stop. 226A in Little Switzerland, if any of you drove it before, this was a day or two after the storm, and this is what was being fixed. So just really just tore up our roads. And all of you know about Alpine Inn on 226. This is half the hotel went off, and they're rebuilding back. But if any of you ever stayed there, it's kind of scary staying there anyway. Yes, ma'am. They're going to put some support structures in here and try to build it back. I don't see how they get insurance. But that was devastating. And I think he had owned that for just a year or two. So devastating to him too. This is near the old 226A toward the old monument there. If you look up from 226A, it just rode these areas to bare rock. And this, if you go down 220, if you go past the bookstore going down toward y'all's house, if there's a monument on the left, a rock monument, like the monument used to be across from Big Lynn Lodge that got knocked down. There's an old tow monument there. That's right next to that. So slides like this, remember, there are over 2,000 of these. Highway 80 on Buck Creek. And if any of you have been from the Parkway down Buck Creek on the McDowell side, it's rough anyway. But all it took out. In this section, as you know, this road does this. It does like this. It meanders back and forth. It took out about 5 sections of it, all the way down. And I think that road is still closed, but I think you can get through. You still can't get through?
They wouldn't let me through recently.
Oh, okay. Okay. I thought they were getting it. There's on down. Just devastated Buck Creek. Same Buck Creek landslide, Highway 80. Parkway's way up here. This thing just went for miles. Unstoppable. There's the CeeLo slide, and this is from Bowdit Strait on Highway 80. If you go through on the way to CeeLo, near Hickory Springs, that's that piece, that's probably 3 or 4 acres in devastation there. But for this to grow back will be very difficult, and it's going to be risking more from the top failing and the sides because there's not much holding it. So you could, and somebody said earlier, does this lower the mountains? Over time it does. This is the way Mount Mitchell and the Blacks get lowered because they have mass loss of material. Remember, Mount Mitchell, for you that don't know, used to be in a neighborhood of 30,000 feet, as high as the Himalayas, as high as Mount Everest, but it is worn over its 400 million year life. So this is what wears them. This really wears them. Financial and structural toll together, Yancey and Mitchell counties face one of the most extensive post-storm rebuilds in the state. Estimates place the cost of full recovery for the road systems at well over $1.1 billion. I bet it's double that. Part of a broader $5 billion infrastructure damage total for western North Carolina. Crabtree Creek Road slide in Little Switzerland. All of you know Crabtree is closed right now. They're fixing this. My neighbor, Horace Coker back there, he and I rode a four-wheeler down there. I don't think we were supposed to, but we did. They've hardly done anything. They put 2 culverts in, and that's all. They haven't even started on this. And that's going to take rock bolting and lots of work. But they moved the concrete barriers and put in 2 culverts. That was 4 days ago. So don't get your hopes up to go to Burnsville from Little Switzerland anytime soon. Lower Crabtree Creek Road, washout. This was right where you go up in the Wolf Den here. This was a few days after the storm. These are ATF agents and FEMA agents. And I gave them a ride on a side-by-side up to check Doug Armstrong's house. They had a map, and they were checking every house because they thought they were going to find people dead. And they were going up Crabtree. But they fixed this pretty fast. You can see the bridge held, but it washed around the bridge. And you can still see damage there once we get to go back Crabtree. Lower Crabtree Creek. It went through these people's yard and buried their car. Poplar boat ramp on 197 at Toe River. Deb and I rode through there, and the locals cleaned it. FEMA, National Guard, nobody helped clean this. They got their own tractors and cleaned it themselves. Look at the mud in that mailbox up to there. This house is gone. This house is gone. But mud was 10, 12, 15 feet high. Unbelievable. Did any of you go through Poplar, through this section shortly after the storm? It was unbelievable. David, you probably did. And there were dead fish all over the sides of the road in the mud. Big cart this long. There's the mud when we were, that's our car as we're going through, where they just cleared it to get through the mud. And the railroad track's over here, what's left of it, not much left. This is right where the Poplar boat ramp is, where the rafters put in to go down the Nolichucky. They put in there and come out in Irwin. So this area was extreme damage. There's the railroad. I'd heard, David, the railroad first estimated this was a 200, 300 million job. I heard somebody say the other day it's over 500 now. Over 500 million to fix this railroad. And part of the reason we had heard that CSX was going to abandon this track because it was going to be too costly. But FEMA and National Homeland Security got involved because this is the route where they take the spent nuclear waste from Tennessee Nuclear away. So, and because of national security, they could not lose this railroad. You heard some of that, David? So, expensive fix here, and this is the Toe River.
Is that also the railroad that the quartz was transported on?
And a lot of people don't understand, not much quartz is transported on the railroad. It's mainly shipped overseas, so it goes on container. all the containers that you see going down the mountain, the truck containers, it's mainly container transport. There's a little bit of feldspar shipped on the rail, but not a whole lot. So the railroad didn't really impact the mining, the quartz or feldspar mining, very much at all, because that's not the way they ship. There's the railroad in relief. I took that picture. And the railroad here is upside down. The track's on the bottom. The track is still intact on the bottom. To flip a railroad track like that, the devastation, and what this weighs. I showed this picture to somebody and they said, boy, that's a sturdy fence. But it washed it up against the rock. This is the railroad bed here. And this is the relief bridge right here, and we'll talk more about relief. This is the relief bridge. This is still open and closed some because it washed the ends around. These houses were devastated. David, what's the lady's name that lives in that house?
Last name is Warwick.
Warwick. We talked to her, and David actually interviewed her. They're trying to build back, and that's a historic. I think that home was 150 years old.
That's the actual Bradshaw home that brought relief into existence.
And we'll talk about relief, and for you that don't know about relief, it's interesting how it got its name. This is near Pigeon Roost Bridge, and you see where they filled in some of this, but there are hundreds of cars like this that you see all around. This is the relief post office. The house right here was washed away mostly. 5 people died right here, washed away with the storm. This is relief, and it's named relief because there was a doctor's office in here, and he was a medical doctor, but his biggest medicine was alcohol that he called relief. And so people would go there to get relief. So they named it relief. And the wives would say, honey, you don't need to be drinking. He said, the doctor gave me that. Doctor gave me that for relief. Anything else about relief, David? I know the Historical Society is trying to save that building. The State Historical Society.
I can tell you the Novachucky that goes through there rose in 3 minutes. How fast it rose.
Yeah.
How those folks could get out.
Yeah, and they didn't have time to think. One of them, we heard, David and I heard, was on the railroad track taking pictures of it, and he got washed away. One of the 5 that was killed. This is inside the relief post office. Just mud and devastation everywhere. This, and I don't remember his name, he's showing how high the water was. There's David. And he lost 5 members of his family. This is the house where they were. And there again there's David interviewing, and there he is. Here's the lady that had the other house that was devastated, but she got away, so she lived. Spruce Pine. There's the gas pumps. There's Ingalls. Of course, most of you know this side of the Ingalls lost their walls. This is Gouge Oil Company. Their tanker trucks had already washed down the river. Tanker trucks were in the river. This is the Spruce Pine Bridge. This is town. There's the depot. So this is the devastation that Spruce Pine received. This is a good before and after. This is before. This is the new YMCA. We got a tour of it today. It's going to open in July. Second week July. It's awesome. There's the YMCA. There's downtown. This is the ball field. We had Rotary Park here, the kids' park. Here's First Baptist Church. It was on a hill. It didn't get hurt bad, but look at the mud. Same picture. There's the YMCA, the old hockey rink. There's Ingalls. They'd already cleared mud out of the parking lot, but just devastated. That's how high the waters were along the Tow River. There's Gouge Oil right after the water went down. Look at some of these oil storage tanks. This is a house at Boland's Creek, which rode a slide down. And I understand a lady in it, who you'll see a picture of in a minute, lived riding this house down, but just destroyed the house. And there she is, and there's the house. Just a lot of these, some of these slides are, houses are built on previous slides because they create a flat plane. Most dangerous place you can build a house because those slides are going to regenerate. And this is what happened here. There's the slide above the house. So all of this came down, the house was built here, and the house just rode the slide down. And of course, as it was riding, it came apart. There's Pensacola on Cane River, Yancey County. All of this was underwater. Just destruction after destruction up Pensacola, up Cane Creek. Remember, it's getting the water off the west side of Mount Mitchell. And all of that area. This is an area that the Cane Creek here is about 3 times as wide as it was normally. The morphology of the rivers changed. They were widened, and a lot of their deep holes were filled in. So the morphology, the river basins were changed. The new intake for the town of Burnsville is right there. So if you ride up this way, you'll see that intake, and you'll see pipes laying in the creek that go and supply water to Burnsville. This is a slide off of Cane Creek, just devastating. And all of this went in the river, and then it just makes massive sludge washing down the river. But see, again, bare bedrock. And again, tilted strata, foliated strata, dipping toward the direction of the slide. And when you think about it, it's going to be hard to have regrowth there. It's going to be tough for something to grow back there. If it gets a small foothold and another rain comes, nothing to hold it. There's another one, landslide on Cane River. This is Hall's Chapel Baptist Church. This is on Hall's Chapel down toward the end of 80. This is the road that parallels Highway 80 going toward Micaville. But the river came up and went through the church, left the front in the back. They had church that Sunday. Service at 11 a.m. Sunday, painted on a bed sheet. And their church was devastated. Since then, they've torn that down and they're trying to rebuild. There's the river at Hall's Chapel. This used to be about this wide. It's 3 to 4 times wide now, the amount of rain that came through there, and just cleared everything to bedrock. That's debris coming down from Hall's Chapel. This is near the CeeLo Clinic. This is the river near CeeLo. The river was this high. Oh, this is remnants of 2 or 3 homes. And all of us remember the big tank at Micaville. Watched that tank about away at that old thread mill. Deb, what was the name of that mill? Taylor Toggs. Yeah, Taylor Toggs. And we saw them cutting that one up. This is still there. Do you recognize the vehicle? What kind of vehicle is that? No. It's a Mercedes camper van. It's a Mercedes camper van. Yeah, there were cars all in there too. Just lots of things. And this is Garin Creek Slide. This is south of Old Fort. This is Garin Creek Fire Department. This is the mountain above Garin Creek. Steep hillsides. This is where people were killed. There's the slide. Slide started all the way up here, and it started as everything liquefied, it all joined. This was probably shaking. So this was probably shaking some of these on this other branch loose. All came down, and then it splayed out all through here. But I'm going to show you a house that was here. There's the house. Notice that hill right there. That's going to be referenced for the next picture. Gone. 7 people killed, wiped away. Didn't know it was coming. But again, we'll go back, before, after. And so, if your house had some shingles washed off or a tree sliding it, Ben, you had a tree up against your house, you're lucky. This is a slide up South Toe. This is right below Boland's Pyramid. This slide is interesting. This is from the North Carolina Geological Survey. This slide, called the 4-H camp slide, started here. That's where the slide started. These are some of my geology friends. This one is about a third of the way down, and that's this. So you can see the devastation of this slide as we progress. On down, all to bedrock. Took everything. And then this slide is here, starting to take structures, and this is where it ended up as it splays out and drops its load. High Rock Creek access debris flow blocked several road developments, again to bare rock. This is Black Mountain, 2 houses destroyed. And a lot of this, we hear about it, but you don't see it. But you just don't understand the full ramifications of what Helene did. Debris flow, this is 3 segments of Highway 9 below Old Fort. This is 226A. This is the part that they rock bolted back on 226A, but that's looking down, and it went a long way. That's now fixed because they rock bolted it back. That's 226A, Little Switzerland. The end's right back here. This was a drone. Look what it did. It took everything. This is an old access road that they cleared, but Dan, I think the entrance to your place is right out here. Big Lynn Lodge is right about here. Were you at home?
We were up there. We're above.
Mm-hmm. Be glad you weren't right in here. You'd have been gone. This is Zirconia in Henderson County. These things are here's another house. This is repairs of I-40 because it wiped it out, of course, and we know it's closed again. This is CSX Road at Poplar, Bridge at Poplar. This was the railroad bridge. There were 4 sections of this washed down the river, the Nolichucky. These things, David, what do those weigh?
Those from 1916. There were 5 of them. They are reusing 4 of them.
Right. These things probably weigh several hundred tons apiece. And so they were going to reuse those, and you ought to see the process that they use. We got pictures. This is the way they got rock to rebuild the railroad. They had trains of trucks. And of course, these trucks ride the rails, but these trucks are special because not only do they carry the rock to rebuild the road, they dump sideways. So these trucks, I always thought, now how do those trucks dump that? They have to dump it on the railroad. They swivel and then dump. So that's the way they're getting the rock. And all of the dump trucks you see coming up and down the mountain, that's rock, mostly going to rebuild the railroad bed because it was washed away. There's the crane they brought in to rebuild the bridge. That's the largest crane in the world, is what I understand. If you look closely, there's the operator's compartment right there. It took 150 tractor trailers to bring this to this spot. And this is at Poplar at the boat ramp. This is in Poplar. This is brought in to put these bridge pieces back. But see the length, I don't know how long that is. But that's the largest crane in the world. Look at the counterweights on the back. This part of the crane is to hold the counterweights.
Is it still there?
Yes. But they just finished the bridge. I'd say it's getting ready to move. So they will probably close the road again. They closed the road going to Johnson City because that whole caravan went over the road as it was closed. There's the crane again. There's how big, this massive, and these are the counterweights. I wish I'd had a person standing by this, but it's just a massive, massive crane. They needed something big enough to pick up those railroad bridge pieces and to span it across the river. They had to build this platform. This is probably a 3-acre platform of concrete they built to hold the crane. Talking about money. There it is. Lifting one of the, and they rebuilt these structures too. They used the same bases, but they reinforced all of these. But there's the crane again, and you can see the operator's compartment right there. A man is in there. This is the crane that put this crane together. There you can see some men standing. But this is a massive, massive, heavy piece of structure. And there's putting in the last piece. But see, that crane reaches all the way across the river because this whole area was wiped out. Does this look familiar? This is for you. This is our Mutsy buck or whatever that thing's called, but it's like a spider. It could go anywhere, but there's the Spruce Pine Fire Department. And of course, we all had to wait while it was getting the trees, but I think it's clean, the best it's ever been cleaned. And then of course, there's the machine. The wheels go up and down independently. They spread out, and this thing does everything. And it's got a chainsaw on the end. It picks up and cuts. And of course, we had to deal with this all the way up Chestnut Grove Church Road. And if you met a car over here, it's bad because this stuff stuck out in the road. But it's mostly all gone now. And again, this is hauling away. They're still here. And they're on contract by the county, but as David said, it's FEMA money paying for that. I had heard, you may know, Dave, they get $8,000 a load.
Something like that.
And you see all those trucks? $8,000 a load. Dave? Dan?
Like all the damage from the slides to the roadway, I've heard some rumors that there's some entity that'll help fix private roads. How do do that?
People are getting private roads fixed. David?
Talk to me after.
Talk to David. He's with the county. Okay. And this is the debris pile in Linville. If you're coming through Crossnore, if you go to Valley Crucis or Boone, unbelievable the debris piles there that they've stacked up to grind. Yes, sir.
So, all this stuff is being turned into mulch.
Mm-hmm.
What is going to happen to all this mulch?
Landfills. They're taking it. Some of ours is going to Lenore. Anywhere else it's going, David?
It's all over Tennessee. Some of it actually is going to mulch.
But it's a good, I've heard you can buy mulch toward the Crabtree line. I heard it used to be free. Now they're charging, I think, a little bit for it. And it's double ground, so it's good mulch.
Just a follow-up. These big piles, is there going to be some composting and with the heat building up? Is it dangerous for these things?
That's why they're taking it elsewhere. Because most of you were here when the Grassy Creek compost pile, that mulch pile caught on fire. It burned for 6 months. For 6 months, and it was stinky burning. Most of you saw that.
Those bogs, peat bogs in Scotland have burned for hundreds of years.
Yes, and these things, you can't put them out. They tried to put that one out for a long time. Hurricane Helene caused unprecedented damage in the mountain region of western North Carolina, where hurricane-level rainfalls is rare, and only 4% of residents have flood insurance. The September storm destroyed about 4,400 homes and damaged 185,000. So great damage. This is Corps of Engineers report on the debris that they removed from the rivers. 4 million cubic yards, enough to fill 3 Empire State buildings. And this is a recent report, another one. I thought it was there, but it's coming. Mitchell County had the worst tree damage and timber loss of any county in western North Carolina, with an estimated loss of $41 million of timber. That may have gone up, David.
Yeah, it has.
Based on timber pricing, North Carolina forest lands lost a value of $214 million of timber, of which 78% was on private lands, 21% on public lands, 1% on park lands. Helene damaged 20% of the forest lands in western North Carolina, including 117,000 acres of vegetation loss and 822 acres of land with some damage. Lots of damage. French-Bald Electric, which a lot of us are on, replaced over 2,200 utility poles, replaced hundreds of miles of wire cable, replaced almost 1,000 transformers at a repair cost of over $40 million. Days before 7-month anniversary of Hurricane Helene, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers celebrated a significant milestone of 5 million cubic yards of storm debris removed. And after the hurricane, there were fundraising efforts to help a lot of the people, including the Oliver Anthony concert. This is where the floodwaters were, and this is what occurred about 6 months later. We're 9 months into the storm. So this was, a lot of people thought this was the biggest attended event ever in Spruce Pine. About 5,000 people estimated. And that's Lower Street. This is across from L&L Furniture, and of course, this is where the water level was. And during that concert event, everybody was taking a picture of this. So that's where the water was.
That's on Lower Street.
It's Lower Street, and there's the Pocket Park.
Right, it's across from the railroad station.
Yes, directly. Yes, it is. Many have suggested that Helene was a 1,000-year event. And you've heard this, 100-year, 500,000. Many would also interpret that as saying the next event will probably occur 1,000 years later. In reality, a 1 in 1,000 year event indicates that each year the event has a 1 in 1,000 chance of occurring. But that does not say Mother Nature is very regular. Natural disasters often come in waves. So a 1 in 1,000 year event could happen 5 times in a year, but subsequently not again for 5,000 years. The case is still a 1 in 1,000 year event. I heard Alan Cook, David, he spoke to our Rotary Club. He said a hydrologist came and did an assessment in Mitchell County, and he said it was a 1 in 1,300 year event.
Yes.
So probably the correct characterization of this event is a 1 in 1,300 year event. Global warming, climate change, which is in large part responsible for the severity of Helene and for its unusual location in the mountains, will continue to facilitate severe weather events like Helene. Dr. Bill Miller, geology professor at UNCA. This is a statement, a position statement from the Geological Society of America, which is the biggest group of scientists in this country. Human-induced increase in greenhouse gases, especially CO2, are the main drivers of recent global warming. Sound public policy and successful climate change mitigation and adaptation require scientifically validated assessment of current and future climate impacts. So this statement basically says it is due to global warming, these impacts, and it is man-induced. It is exacerbated. Colorado State University forecast predicted in 2025 Atlantic hurricane season would be above normal with 17 named storms and 9 hurricanes. The news isn't good for North Carolina if their predictions come true. North Carolina is ranked number 2 when it comes to risk of being impacted by a named storm this season compared to other states and along the East Coast, Gulf Coast. And again, May 13th, 226A, Little Switzerland, the slides will keep coming. They've been weakened. They'll keep coming. They won't stop. Could this happen again? You decide. Knowing that the conditions and energy that fueled this historical storm are not getting better, but are getting worse, and very likely much worse. That's something to think about. So what caused this? The energy and the fuel that developed this is not going away. It's getting worse. Any questions? I don't mean to scare you to death, but that's a fact. These are facts. Yes, ma'am.
You know, I've been thinking this question as you've been progressing. What is the lesson for us? Should we be rebuilding where we are? Should we think of building somewhere else?
Lessons are, if you're looking, or if you live on a southeast facing slope where your rock is tilted this way, your dip direction is toward the southeast or toward the valley, and you're on some loose soils and you're on steep soil at high elevation, you're in danger. You're in danger. Where's Dan Nettles? I've been to Dan's neighborhood, Swiss Village, several times, people looking to build houses up there. Some of them are okay and some of them are perilous. And there are a couple of homes that we've helped with up there with the slide slid out under partially the house. And there's a family up there now not living in the house because they're afraid of it.
Alex, we heard in Florida that people in Shenandoah Valley, as late as March and April, were still living in tents. Is that correct?
No. Most people have been moved to either campers or things. Some of the workers are living in tents. But I've heard, I think every county has reported the people are housed. But our Rotary Club in Spruce Pine, we sold refreshments at the concert. We made $5,500. We wrote $1,000 checks and gave them to every house member we knew that lost their home. No questions asked, we just gave them the checks. And they were so appreciative. Deb and I gave them to one lady, she just boo-hooed as we handed her the check. Yes?
Alex, in addition to where should you put your house, you have to think about it. Should the parkway be where the parkway is?
Parkway should have been built on the other side of the hill. I-40 should have been built on the other side of the hill. Parkway will always have slides. It will never not have slides. And if you drive to Mount Mitchell, that's the worst section. If you drive to Mount Mitchell, which is going south toward Asheville, look at the right bank. Look at the rocks tilted this way. They're already coming apart. And so the parkway is as beautiful a road as it is of high risk of being destroyed again. Any other questions? Yes?
Earthquakes. Is that possible?
Yes. Little ones. Just little earthquakes. We're in the East Tennessee seismic zone area, but they're little cracks and pulls and pressures between the mid-Atlantic ridge and the middle of the Atlantic in California. Those are just really little bumps. The biggest one was in Ashe County about 3 years ago, and it did some damage, but you don't really have to worry about that. I wouldn't buy earthquake insurance here. You cannot buy landslide insurance here. You can't. It's not available. But be careful where your house is and where you build.
Was that insurance available prior to the storm?
No, you couldn't get landslide insurance anyway. Okay, guys, if you have any other questions, ask me, but thank you for coming.